most of the podcasts, we talk about cases involving murder or celebrity from Hollywood, but the case we're going to talk about today has nothing to do with that. It's about a very lovely community in the north end of Los Angeles, a place where you'd love to live. All of us would love to live. Great neighbors. Everything is very nice and convenient. However, all of a sudden, things have changed. The dogs are being poisoned. The cats are being drowned in the pools. The houses are catching on fire in the middle of the night for no reason. What is going on? Well, one of the neighbors got fed up and he said, we got to do something about it. And he put in a security system which included 16 cameras that covered every square inch of his front yard, side yard, backyards, so he could tell if there was any person wandering around, lurking around, causing these problems. But he didn't see anybody. But these cameras reveal something you won't believe. So let's get into our story, see what it's all about. Well, what's our topic today? Neighbor with the flamethrower, or better known as the Gary G case. Well, flamethrowers have become quite popular lately, kind of controversial, and the question is it a toy or a weapon? Now we're going to be talking about a very nice neighborhood, and here's where Gary lives, and his next door neighbor is Albert, and across the street is Ed in his house. So those are the three individuals we'll be talking about, as well as the locations in question. One of our central characters is Rio, the German Shepherd dog that Albert had gotten for the three girls, and they loved it. Rio loved to take baths in this tub, and he had the entire run of the backyard because it was all fenced in. Now, occasionally, Rio liked to bark and would bark at the neighbor. One time the neighbor was digging around at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then Rio was out there barking at him. But the dog, for some reason, seemed to be poisoned. And how did it happen? You know, nobody knew for certain. But they took Rio into the vet, and the vet said, yeah, he's been poisoned with something, but nobody knew what. So that, must have been about 6 months later. Again, the dog is throwing up and is very, very sick, lethargic. And when they checked the backyard, they found over 30 chocolate Hershey bars strewn all throughout the backyard. And they could smell antifreeze. There was a pungent odor of antifreeze. They took Rio to the vet, and the vet says, yeah, there's no doubt. Rio's been poisoned with antifreeze. Wow, what's happening and who's doing this? Now, directly across the street was Ed's house, and Ed had lived there many, many, many years with his wife and his son. Here, you know, you can see the basketball hoop there. Liked to play basketball out in the front, in front of the garage. Now, and Ed came home with his wife one evening, and when they went in, they smelled gasoline, and they looked on the floor in the kitchen, and it was soaking with gasoline. And here you can see these are tins that were taken from the arson investigation. Is why would somebody pour gasoline into Ed's house? Now this is a view of the kitchen, and you can see at the far end is a doggy door, and it's a little flap area so their dog could come in and out. And the question was, could the arsonist pour gasoline through the doggy door? And it didn't add up. It didn't make sense. But They took the doggy door off, and they had an individual see if they could climb through it. They couldn't. There was no way for a human being to climb through it. However, you could climb in with your hand and shoulder and reach up and unlock the door. And undoubtedly, that's how the arsonist got in, was able to reach up, unlock the door, and then go through the door. So that was the attempt arson on Ed's place. Now, a timeline was put together so that we could explain to the jury when all of these things occurred. When Rio was first poisoned, that was before, must have been in 2000, and then in 2001 was the time that Ed's kitchen gasoline was poured all over it. The Hershey bar incident occurred in June of 2001, and it was March of 2002, they had another report of a poisoning of an animal in the neighborhood there. So it wasn't until 2003 that Rio finally died from some form of poisoning. At the same time, in 2003, a number of the neighbors found their cats drowned in various pools. So what is going on? Why is this happening? Now we go to the remodeling stage. Albert, as I had indicated, had 3 daughters, and they were growing up, and he needed more room, additional bedrooms for the girls. So they decided to remodel their house and expand the back of a house into the backyard and have 2 additional bedrooms. And here, this just gives a layout. Here, Gary's house is on one side, Albert's is on the other side, and he's trying to put these additional bedrooms in the back section. And construction started. And here the girls are playing around in the backyard. And the idea was to expand the back of the house, adding the 2 bedrooms. And they were going to put a pool in as well. Now, February 22nd, 2004 was the date when the house caught on fire. Albert's family, they were in the house. The remodeling was taking place, and the house caught on fire. And it was thought, well, it must have had something to do with the remodeling. They must have had a torch, or they must have done something, or a gas line. So it was amazing that nobody was harmed or nobody died as a result of this fire. All the children and Albert and his wife were able to get out. Now, when the fire department came out to check out the origin of the fire, they're looking around and they're trying to find where could it have started. And it appeared that the point of origin was by the kitchen, and it might have been the crawl space under the kitchen. Now, were they doing some work there, some plumbing work, some electrical work? Could that have been the reason for the fire? Well, they couldn't tell for certain. Here you can see because of the fire, they had the construction crew there, and then they just started fixing up after the fire. So this is what it looked like after they got it all done. You can see the back of the house has been expanded, and the pool, there is the pool that has been built. It took a while to finish the pool, but here it was at the back of their lot. Very nice pool. Takes up the entire back lot of Albert's house. Now, direct your attention to May 13, 2004. This is 4 months later after the first fire. There's another fire. And this fire was devastating. This was much larger than the first fire. And here you can see the damage that was done to the kitchen area. This was extensive. Totally burnt. And fortunately, nobody was home at the time because of they were doing all the remodeling, and the family was living in an apartment down in the Glendale area. So major damage to the house. And just to give you some understanding of how extensive this fire was, here you can look all the way into the kitchen, totally destroyed. Even the walls. There's a interior look, and that's what it looked like before. And you can see what a large fire that burnt the kitchen up. And again, they're trying to find the point of origin, and the entire wall on that one side where the driveway was has been completely burnt out. And they get on the outside of the kitchen, they look at that crawl space that they had looked at before, and they're trying to think, maybe there's something, a gasoline leak, maybe somehow something happened. Here, you can look, there couldn't have been from the gas line because the gas line was capped off. So there was no gas that was available for the house, so it wasn't from the natural gas that was piped into the house there. Okay, so the arson investigators continue to look at the crawl space, and they know that that's where it all started. And they take samples of the ground, and they take it to the crime lab, and sure enough, it comes back with gasoline. There was gasoline in the soil. Somehow somebody had sprayed or poured gasoline under the kitchen in that crawl space. All right, just to show you that the other rooms were affected just as much. This was the living room, and after the fire, look at it, totally damaged. Again, the master bedroom, a lot of smoke damage there. It wasn't as much as far as burning. The children's room, you can see it scorched it. It was very hot fire, did a lot of damage to the walls, the carpeting, and the ceilings. Now, again, another timeline to show you when all of this occurred. The first fire happened on February 22nd, 2004, and the second fire is only 4 months later, in May. Wow, how does 2 fires occur in such a short period of time? Now, we put this together so the jury could see in the first fire the damage was done to the kitchen, the crawl space area. And the same thing the second fire, it was much more extensive, but it was in the same area, that crawl space of the kitchen. Now, what does all of that mean? Well, the arson investigators are trying to figure out, and just to show you what it looks like, they were doing a lot of construction, as we said. The driveway had been torn up, and Albert's property line was right on that wall, and Gary's property was on the other side. And here you can see this driveway, and if you go down this driveway, there's a chain link fence above the wall that separates the property between Albert and Gary. And so the arson investigators are looking, they see on the chain link fence, they see something that's been burned. And here, there's a good view of why is that burned next to the chain link fence, that brush area. So this is just to give you a perspective of that area where that chain link fence had a burn in it, and it was directly across from the crawl space of the kitchen. Now, when they looked over on Gary's side, the soil had been raked. Here you can see somebody had raked all the soil up there, and it was nice and smooth, and you can't see any footprints or anything there. So they obtained a search warrant for Gary's property to see if there might have been somebody that was hiding over there and was doing something to get gasoline over into the kitchen of Albert's place. So they talked to the neighbor, Gary, and to see whether he saw anybody or heard anybody. And here the arson investigators are talking to Gary, and he said, I was the only person home when that fire occurred, and I didn't see anybody around. Then he went on to say, no one was in my yard in the last several days. I mean, nobody, vendors or gardeners or anybody coming by. And then he makes this offhanded comment. He says, I couldn't care less if the arsonist is caught. Well, that was kind of strange to the arson investigators. Why would he make that statement? So they have a search warrant for his place so they can check it out. And they check his pockets, and he has in his pocket the keys to his truck. Now, the truck is at the far end of the driveway. You can just barely make out. There it is. There's the picture of the truck. It's a Toyota. And when they did a search of the truck with that search warrant, they found this sprayer. The sprayer was like a paint sprayer. And here you can get a better view of it. It looks like it's been modified in some way, shape, or form. What does all that mean? But in the back of the truck was a bag, and it was a plastic bag, and it was full of paper towels and this long hose, very long hose. After the first fire, what Albert did was he set up a security system in his house. Cost him a lot of money. It cost him over $10,000. And he put in 16 security cameras throughout the entire yard of his house, in front, on the side, and the back. So he's got a lot of cameras all over. And I just want you to see where the cameras are. You can see little red dots, and they show you where cameras were located, and the arrow points the direction that the camera was pointing. So that gives you, there's a lot of cameras, 16 in total. Here's one in the driveway gate. You can see it right there. It's hidden in a little electrical box there, and it has a view looking toward the garage. And there, that one on the bottom, you can see that's the view that you would have from that camera. Now, on the other end, by the garage, they put another camera, and there, it just got a little hole there. That's where the camera looks out through that hole. And it has a view of the entire driveway looking in the opposite direction. So that driveway is pretty well covered. And when they looked at the film, they noticed that at 3:15 in the morning, there was something like a spray. Something was being sprayed from Gary's property over into Albert's property. What could that be? What in the world would that all be like? And here is a sequence of the photos from the gate, and you can see there's like a flame, something up there in that circle, and it gets larger. The flame gets larger and brighter, and it passes through the driveway, and it goes all the way over, but it looks like it's on something. What could it be? I mean, is it a pipe? Is it a wire? What is it on? And then you see that flame come back. It's going back over to that chain link fence in Gary's yard. So just to give, for the jury, they could see all these different photos showing how something is being extended over into Albert's yard in particular, almost at the level of that crawl space of the kitchen. And it goes over and then it comes back to Gary's side. And look how it lights up in the bottom photos there. It obviously caught something on fire, and there is a flame. So just to give you an idea, when did they check on it? The Albert and his wife went over. Now remember, they were living in an apartment because they couldn't live in the house because it was being remodeled from the first fire damage. They go there, they turn on the water and the sprinklers, and then it was, most likely a little after 11, maybe 11:15, that Albert goes back and turns the water off and checks the property, and everything is fine at that time. And it wasn't until, it must have been about 3:15, that the photos show this flame going across the driveway on a pipe or something. And it wasn't until about 4:15, almost an hour later, that the fire department is called out and they arrive to put the fire out at Albert's house. Now, as far as that, it was something that could be pressurized, and you could take that cord and you could put a connection on it, and you could spray that, and you could spray gasoline. You could put gasoline in this paint sprayer, and then you could pressurize it and you could spray it out. And that is what happened through this chain link fence. That's what was stuck through there. Now, they did further testing for DNA, and when they went through that bag, they found some gloves, some paper towels and gloves, and there they are, those gloves, and they take them in to have them check for DNA. And as a matter of fact, here's Gary's DNA, and here are the gloves, and you can see it matches up identical. Those gloves were obviously worn by Gary at some time, and they were placed in that bag. Now, as far as other evidence that the arsonist investigators were able to uncover, is when they went into the garage, they found a paper towel rack, and here you can see the paper towels, and it has exactly the same type of paper towels that were found in that big bag. They're identical, same design. And also, when they were looking in that garage, Gary's garage there, they found a box of matches, and there they are, wooden stick matches. Further in the garage, they found PVC pipe that could be used to spray the gasoline over into Albert's yard. Now, as far as that paint sprayer, when they had some experts look at it, they could tell it had been modified, where they could put the nozzle on it and they could spray gasoline out of it, and in the other section is where they could pressurize it. So that was what was used. And here is where the compressor, in the back there of the garage, is a compressor that was used to put the pressure in the paint sprayer. Now, what happened next was that, we have children. Albert had 3 children, and children make noise. They play, they giggle, they laugh, they shout. Also, they had the dog Rio, and Rio liked to bark and would make noise when he was barking. Now, as to Gary, well, this is the evidence that points to Gary's involvement. His statements that he made, the gasoline sprayer there, and the security camera that showed that an arsonist was spraying gasoline into Albert's yard. Look at all the evidence. And those gloves had been used by Gary. That was his DNA in it. So this was a tremendous amount of evidence pointing to Gary. Now, who was Gary? Well, Gary was, he most likely was in his late 50s, and he lived by himself, and he was overly protective of his property. He didn't want anybody in his property. Didn't want dogs in his property. And he was always kind of rude and hostile to his neighbors. His occupation was an industrial technician, and he could build things, make things mechanical. And one of his, what he loved most was watching CSI. He would watch every single TV program. And when he went to trial, he was defended by Robert Shapiro, O.J. Simpson's attorney. Now, Gary was a person who wanted to scare the neighbors away. He thought he could outsmart them, and by doing these various things, he could force them to move, get out of his neighborhood. Well, the jury listened to all the evidence, and they convicted him of the arson, and he was sentenced to prison as a result of that. I guess we've learned something about neighbors and how friendly they can be. Here, this is where Gary and Albert lived next door to each other. Didn't work out real well for either one of them. And I guess you could say not all neighbors are like Mr. Rogers. The old saying, "Won't you be my neighbor?" Well, I don't know if you'd want Gary G to be your neighbor. Now, as to flamethrowers, well, they come in all shapes and sizes, as we just learned. And, we said at the very beginning, are they a toy or are they a weapon? Well, you decide which they are. Now, if you enjoy learning about investigation of cases by detectives, this is one of my books, Detectives Tracking Down Killers, and it spells out how various detectives, they find clues and they pursue them and figure out who the suspect is, and they build a case against them. So if you want more information on investigations, get my book. If you want more information about prosecutors, how do attorneys put together these cases to convince a jury that a defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. In my book, The Superstar Prosecutors, I list several prosecutors, and I go through a number of their cases and show you how methodical they are and how effective they are. So if you want more information on prosecutors, get my book. Otherwise, I hope you join us again for another True Crime Files podcast when we discuss another case. See you then.